Today's podcast is brought to you by Blue Canary. The bird has landed on beautiful Bainbridge Island, conveniently located at 499 Madison Avenue. ASE Master Technician Clint Ramsey brings over 15 years of experience, award-winning diagnostic skill, and a desire to reinvent the automotive repair experience. Schedule an appointment online at bluecanary.biz or call them today at 206-451-4220. I got something for your mind, body, and soul. I got something for your mind, body, and soul.
You have found the B.I.STANDER podcast. Now here's your host with the most, Tiny Tim.
What's good, Podcastville? You found the B.I.STANDER podcast. I am your host, Tiny Tim, the Mr. Rogers of podcasting, a.k.a. the King of Casual. Today I have a special guest in Bill Werlin, the co-founder of Here, a new traveling app that I absolutely am in love with and want to tell you about it, but we need to find out more about it from Bill himself. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Tim.
Good. So you correct me if you tell me your elevator speech on the way here. But basically, I found this app where it's here, like the location you're at, and here, like you would audible-lize something much like a podcast. It works on a notification system where you start driving towards a certain area and a notification will come on of 4-minute or so, 400-word little essay audio podcast telling you about a site that's on your road trip and that you may want to visit. Does that summarize it a little bit?
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. The premise of the app, Tim, is that no matter where you go, you're traveling through stories. And the stories can be the history of the place. It can be the cultures, which is always pretty interesting. Local insights, the geology, the natural wonders of the area. What colorful characters lived here? Is there music? Is there a music aspect to the area, et cetera? So there's 8 categories. And we find these stories and we give each one of the stories a GPS coordinate. So we pinpoint the stories on a map. And then we set up an active range around that story. And when you, as you're traveling, cross the circumference of that active range, the story starts to play. So what we're trying to accomplish is what you're looking at out your windows, you'll start hearing about it. So it will give you just this perspective of, as you're traveling along. The classic example we use is, how many times have you been bumping along and you see a sign that says historical marker 2 miles? Mm-hmm. You go into the mental gyration. Should I stop? I should. You're by it. Then it goes to, I'll just catch it on the way back, right? And that hardly ever happens. So what we do is historical marker 2 miles. The story starts playing and it tells you what that historical marker is as you're cruising through that area.
That's probably a little bit better than a plaque.
Well, it's a little less slamming on the brakes and getting out, running over to the plaque, jumping back in and going again. Mm-hmm. So it's been absolutely a blast creating this thing. And I think I mentioned to you the other time that when we chatted, I'll get a call from a narrator or writer every other week or so, and they'll just be laughing and they'll say, "You can't make this stuff up." Mm-hmm. I mean, the stories are crazy. Um, excuse me. We got a story, I guess it's 2 months ago now. A young fellow falls in front of a train in a commuter train station from New Jersey to New York City called East Path. And the station's been there since the 1800s. And this was in the late 1860s. And a guy standing on the platform reaches down, grabs the kid by the collar, pulls him up from in front of the train, the incoming train that's coming in. The kid that fell in front of the train, young man, was Abraham Lincoln's son. The guy who pulled him out was John Wilkes Booth's brother.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's nuts. It's just nuts. You get all these unbelievable stories, and the truth is stranger than fiction. I laughingly tell all the science fiction writers, take a back seat. I got real stories for you.
Yeah, we're connected in a weird way ourselves, actually. You have a business partner in Woody Sears and Kevin Costner, and they're the other co-founders. What's Kevin do again? No, just kidding.
He's a struggling actor. We kind of hope he's going to make it one of these days.
He's a great storyteller himself. You also have two venture capitalists that I want to get to a little bit later that I have a few connections to as well. In Marcus the Prophet and Kevin Durant, our rookie Seattle Sonic player back in the day here in Seattle. So the five of you guys are motoring right along. And I was kind of wondering how you guys all connected yourselves. Was it Woody had an idea, was talking to Costner's wife, she introduced him, they had a little chat, then you come along, then a couple guys that got a little bit of angel investment money to toss around?
I'll give you a little bit of the story. I was originally from Colorado, and my grandfather was a hard rock miner, rancher, semi-politician. He was director of state institutions back there and so on. And when I was 14, 15, I got happily volunteered, I guess that would be the appropriate term, to drive him around Colorado and New Mexico, visiting iron placer mines down at Silver City, New Mexico, or the nut ward over in down on the 265 along the southern edge of Colorado.
If I could interject real quick, did you ever check out Taos in New Mexico?
Oh, sure, you bet.
What'd you think of that?
No, well, I spent there's another part of the story for you.
Okay.
So, as I would travel, as I was driving him, I had this verbal encyclopedia in the passenger seat telling me about the towns and the battles. And he could look at a hillside and see the mine dumps going up the hillside. And he could tell me where the vein was relative to the mine dumps, how these mountains, came together and so on. And so my first real experiences from traveling was to have this constant litany of information about what I was seeing out the windows or the local area. When I got out of school, it was just really at the start of the ski industry, it's the first big blush of the ski industry. And I became a road dog salesman, traveling from ski area to ski area and sport shop to sport shop in 8 Western states. And so I was on the road, sometimes 6 hours, 5-6 hours at a time. And I had this palpable loss of information coming. And I just found myself saying, what do people do? Why do people live here? How do they make a living? Wow, that's a pretty cool strata of rock. I wonder what it is, etc. So the original idea coalesced a little bit to make a brochure, a trifold brochure based on mile markers along these brand new things that were just being created called interstate highways. And that'll also give you an indication as to the color of my hair with a little bit of white and gray. And I would pick these mile markers and just do a little paragraph at mile marker 263. This is Georgetown, Colorado. It has the Hamel House. There's some old mine, just that's what you would get. And that was the original idea. And as with probably many good ideas or many ideas, I'm not sure I'll qualify it quite yet, that disappeared in between the ears and didn't surface for, shall we say, decades. My wife and I returned from living offshore in 2012, and probably 2016, something like that, I get a phone call from this guy, Woody Sears. And I had hired Woody's cousin to do a sportswear line for a company that I was running a few years earlier. And Woody called and said, my cousin Rob says I should meet you and get to know you a little bit. Great, happy to do so. So we had a lunch here in Santa Barbara. And great lunch. And Woody filled me in. He had a great technical background. He worked for AT&T and really was global communications fellow for AT&T. And at the end of the conversation, he said, if you ever had an idea that could work on the internet, let me know. And I said, well, here's one that's always been kind of appropriate. It's kind of a located deal. And that was it. That was the ignition point. Woody fell in love with it. And that's really what fired us up. Fast forward 2 years, and you were pretty close, actually. Woody's wife was at the elementary school playground of where Kevin's children go. And the two mothers were talking about, what are the husbands doing, what's going on, et cetera. And Brooke, Woody's wife, mentioned to Christine, Kevin's wife, about this thing called Here, Here. And Christine said, Kevin would go absolutely bananas on this thing.
Because he's a storyteller, right?
He's a storyteller and absolutely fascinated with history. And he laughingly says his kids hate to go on a road trip with him because he's always saying, we got to stop at every road marker, at every historical marker. And they go, oh, Dad, not another, this kind of stuff, right? Yeah, and so he absolutely jumped in with both feet. And he had one request, really, and it was something that really fell in line with kind of what Woody and I believe in and so on. He wants Here to tell the story of America through the eyes of the indigenous people that were here first. So we've put that into a special category, a special way of telling those stories. We've broken it into two parts. And the first part is a longer version of story that Kevin narrates all of these. Mm-hmm. And it's done by the section of the country. So Southern California, Central California, Northern California, Northwest type stuff, all of which have these stories. And these stories are 12 to 15 minutes long. So they're the one set or the one type of stories that are outside of our normal format. But these stories, what was the first people's life before the foreigners came? What happened when the foreigners came, which is generally pretty bleak, and what's going on in that area of the country now. So he narrates those three components of a very longer story. The other side of that is where we get the elders of the tribes to tell the legends of the tribe. So they'll talk about the sky god and the earth mother and how the people migrated from one area to the other using a rainbow bridge. And you get these old voices telling this story, and it's remarkable. It truly is remarkable. So that's how Kevin got involved.
Nice.
And then
what made you decide to get more seed money for this project? Was this a labor of love, or was this something that you wanted to actively get seed money and start scaling?
Start scaling. Yeah. It is not an inexpensive hobby, if you want to call it that.
You're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, no, I know. Because we have to find the story. Then we research the story, then we write the story, then we edit the story, and then we narrate it. And so there's there's a fairly healthy investment in each story. Yeah. And, right now we're right at 9,000 stories across the US and more every day. But it's a task. At the high point of our 48 state start, as we were filling all 48 states, we had 14 writers and 8 narrators going on a daily basis. And we've scaled that back a little bit right now because we are getting a wave, if you will, of people, just common people. That's not it. Local residents that call up and say, well, you don't have a story in my town. I have one for you. Mm-hmm. So there's this wave of stories coming. It's very fun. And to talk to these individual people, they're just so excited about being able to have their story in that town for posterity, where anybody can hear it as they go through.
Yeah, that's an awesome thing too. And the more people that contribute, the more diversity you'll have, and equitable stories that cross the whole United States.
Exactly.
How did you get in Kevin Durant and Marcus on board to be part of the project?
Woody has been, I have really kind of not isolated, but segregated myself over into all the content. I mean, that's our product. So the whole content delivery side, Woody's been on the tech and fundraising side for it. And I think literally, as if nothing else, here would be a classic case study in serendipitous meetings. Really. I mean, I was in Colorado in 2019. I was in my little hometown, has 700 people on a good Saturday night. And we're sitting in the local diner, my brother and my wife and I. And my brother said, I just got an interesting call, or I just saw on Facebook. That was it. I saw on Facebook this guy I haven't seen in 20 years. He was in the windsurfing business, and he was an editor and a publisher of Windsurfing Magazine and Stand Up Paddle Magazine. And I know that he was a history nut. And he said he might, there's a chance he might be interested in here. And I said, great. Get hold of him. Let's find out what's going on. I end up talking to this fellow by the name of Clay Feeder. And he lives in York, Maine, which is right on the border of Massachusetts and Maine. And I called him up, and Otto's my brother, and, a lot of back and forth there, and that's cool, and history and reminiscing. And I said, here's what we're doing. And he goes, oh, this sounds really good. I'm a Civil War and Revolutionary War guy. Cool. I said, well, if you ever have any stories, oh yeah, I can get you stories. All right. Why don't you do this? Why don't you take a look from Portland, Maine down to Boston? It's 100 plus miles there. I said, give me a couple stories and see how you do it. We're looking for stories in the 350 to 450 word range. 2 days later, he calls back. He goes, I got 75 stories for you.
Wow.
He went ballistic. And he goes, yeah. And in Maine, this is so cool. In Maine, I got some stories about a very distant cousin of mine, Daniel Webster. I went, really? Daniel Webster? My grandmother, her name is Frances Ann Webster. And we are cousins to the Daniel Webster. I ended up being cousins with this Clay Feeder guy.
That's crazy.
Oh my! It's just been one thing after another of this stuff. It's been hilarious, and just it's Claudia just goes, "Is this another one of those chance meetings?" I'm going, "Yeah." I mean, it happens all the time.
Those got to keep you young and happy and fun to discover, unique people with unique stories all over the world.
Yeah, and the people are. They're just so excited. It's a passion. You can get very, you can get really over the top on it, but storytelling is how humans have passed wisdom and down through the ages. The stories of the elders. I firmly have been on that soapbox for years. A small school, I was the head of the chairman of the board of an international school in Japan, and the headmaster and I felt so strongly about the stories of the elders, we would have them come in and speak to the classes and tell the stories. And, I think we get it now in particular, this has gotten very interesting, and we're looking at variations on this. But we've had a lot of people come back to us and say, I was driving with my son or my daughter, or we were in the car driving, and we heard a hear story. And even better than the story was the conversation that it engendered afterwards.
Yes.
Where the kids started asking questions about this, that, and the other things. And they said they got their heads up off their phones. They're outside looking and listening as they're traveling along. So as I say, it's, given rise to other thoughts on educational opportunities or field trip opportunities and so on.
Yeah.
But it's the whole idea of storytelling and how people just love it. They just absolutely love it. So
tell me a little bit of story about your background and what took you to Japan. You were doing sporting goods over there. Do you speak Japanese? Did you live over there? I spent the majority of my career in the outdoor business. When as I say, I was a ski rep, just a traveling salesman. No matter how you paint the picture. See, you were a young hustler, and then now I'm seeing it all connect. And then you go on to be the president of North Face, and somewhere in between, you dillied with that and dallied with the other.
That's about the way it worked. Yeah, I spent almost 19 years with the North Face. Started the skiwear division with a couple other guys. Then in 5 years as president of the North Face, then had a couple of companies.
What is that you're doing? Sorry, you keep going over the microphone or something and it makes a swooshing noise that we can't hear you.
Sorry. 19 years with the North Face, 5 as president, and then a couple of small companies. And then a buddy of mine, a fellow by the name of Michael Crook, who's a professor now down at University of Oregon.
Be a tough name for a banker.
Yeah, no, exactly. He became president of Patagonia. And so I called him up, and this was in late 1999. And I called him up just to find out how he'd survived his first 3 months with Chenard, because that's not always the easiest thing in the world. And then at the end of the conversation, I said, well, hey, if you ever have anything come up outside the United States that you need somebody like me, let me know. 2 days later, he calls back and he said, would that include Japan? And Claude and I had talked at long, and the reason I asked him the question in the first place is we wanted to take our 2 young children. They were in probably 10 and 11, I believe. And we wanted to give them an experience outside the U.S. We wanted them to experience other cultures and see other places and so on. So let's do it. So we signed up for a 2-year contract, and we came back after 13 years over there.
Wow.
So I ran Patagonia over there for 9 years, and then Burton Snowboards for a couple of years, and then Asia Pacific for Keen Footwear for a couple of years.
Keen Footwear is like hiking shoes and such?
Yeah, out of Portland.
Yeah, I've seen them here and there.
Yeah, it's a good brand, great brand. And so that's a very quick snapshot of professional history. Still sit on a few boards and a couple of nonprofits, but probably all my time, pretty darn much right now, is focused on Here. Okay,
what's next for Here?
More stories.
More stories.
We get real happy with ourselves. Hey, we got 9,000 stories. 9,000 stories it's not even close to a drop of water in a 100-gallon bucket. This number of stories that are out there.
Well, I took a trip towards the peninsula, and I was like, oh,
I could tell them about this. I could tell them about that. I'm always playing the tour guide either here in the peninsula or in Belltown in downtown Seattle, because I lived there for 15 years, right adjacent to the Pike Place Market. So there's been so much history in downtown that I've been a part of. And,
Well, it's just
anybody
like
comes into town, I grab them by the arm and I'm like, let me tell you a story.
there you go. You will be as addicted as I am to this thing. You'll be sitting there having a conversation and somebody will just start telling you about a relative or a place they've been, and it'll just go, you look at them and you go, well, that's a here story. It's people, had a good friend of mine say I should rent myself out to cocktail parties because I can give them stories, at this point from all over the US easily. But looking forward, we've had some very, it's actually in process interest from a couple of guys in Australia. We've had a good European contact, which is going to be a really interesting thing over there when we get over there, because it's, you'll have the local languages, and then we're thinking about how to address tourism and all the rest of it. So, and laughingly, out here in the West, where you and I are, we kind of look at story levels or the quantity of stories in a given area in levels. Mm-hmm. Our first level out here is the early 1800s, right? I mean, there's a few stories about the pine or the guides and the woodsmen and the Kit Carsons and the Lewis and Clark, right? But then things really started popping with the gold rush and all of those things. You go back east and you go up the Keys. Now we're dropping down into the 1500s and the 1600s and, all of this. You get to Europe, we're only going to drop down 1,000 years over there and have stories. It's just crazy.
It's hard to find somebody around from that era to tell you the story too.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would think that, my wife's on a New York to Arizona road trip right now. I got to get that app out to her right now as soon as possible, because she was asking about it this morning, going, hey, I'd like to try that out. Sounds like a cool idea. But I think there's probably, besides history, there's few and far between, I think, landmarks so much as on the coast cities, if you're driving right down the middle, or Route 66 or to Wall Drugstore.
Sure. As I say, we have 8 categories, and those categories are history. And there's one school of thought that says anything that happened yesterday or before can fall into that category. Yeah.
Funny.
So history, special places of interest, culture, colorful characters, local insights, natural wonders, music, and sports. So those are the categories. And the sports it can talk about the ski areas, the oldest ski areas, the newest ski areas, what's going on. There's been a few things, a story or two on just the issues of weather and so on. We do stories like, and these are local, I think, where do we have these? In Local Insights. The Conservation Alliance, which is the federation, if you will, or group collection of outdoor companies that contribute to physically save, it's not a lobbying organization, it's actual work to save areas of the country. Wherever they've had those successful stories, we tell that story. We put that story up.
I think you totally align with somebody like the Sierra Club or some of these huge, like Cascade Bicycle Club.
Sure.
There's thousands and thousands and thousands of bicyclists that spend some time on the road. Is there any room for true crime?
True crime, sure.
Yeah.
I don't have a story come to mind right away, but yes, there are. Dillinger and we had a lot on Dillinger. We have got stories on Bonnie and Clyde. We've got all those kind of stories are there.
Because out here we had Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer, and in California there was a lot.
Yeah.
Not the most attractive story, I guess, if you're
no. and some of the stories I tend to try and call ourselves a facilitator as opposed to a storyteller. And that's the company specifically. The storytellers tell the story. Yes, we produce the stories, or we have produced we produce 99% of the 9,000. But those stories are vetted. They go through a vetting process to make sure that they are true, and sometimes there's slightly different takes at the same story, and we try and do that. And we've had listeners say, "Hey guys, you didn't quite get this right," or
yeah,
where you live to try and get the right pronunciations.
Yes.
I wave the white flag all the time as a narrator. I'm just going, man.
We're near the Salish Sea here, and there's indigenous names to so much. And
oh man, it's crazy.
Anybody that comes over here, I excuse them for their ability to speak.
Well, I thank you for that. However, our listeners from the Northwest aren't quite as forgiving as you are. They let us know right away if we've screwed that one up, but that's the way it should be, and that's fine.
Besides the 5 of you that are the big team, do you have employees, and how many employees do you have to do this? Because I'm sure with Kevin Costner doing narration and shooting a top show right now.
Yeah.
How much time?
Really the full-time employees are 5. And then we have contracted narrators and writers. Excuse me. And then we have a participating, if you will, board of advisors. An advisor who has some equity participation is the CTO, Chief Technical Officer. And these are people that they love here. They're willing to do it, betting on the come, if you will. Some of the narrators some of the key narrators have stepped up in that exact same way. I just want to be part of this. I want to tell the stories. Mm-hmm. So it's really, it's unique in that way. I mean, it's a business, yes, but, and again, not to get overly melodramatic and so on, but if we can do this right, we will be leaving a legacy. Mm-hmm. That all of these stories will be there for generations.
Yes, it's a pretty awesome idea. I think very highly of it. My political co-host Joel Underwood always says that we're leaving a legacy in our conversations regarding politics. And this is the 5th year of doing this. And my Father's Day gift is my son hosting a conversation with me every year.
Oh, cool.
And, I understand passion projects and how leaving a legacy about others is important and a great idea.
That's good. Very cool. Good for you.
Well, Bill Werlin, thank you for your time today. Go out and get the app Here. You've been listening to The Bystander. Be kind.